Hello everyone. On behalf of King's Academy students, parents, faculty, and staff, I am pleased to welcome Mr. Dan Azzi to our COVID-19 symposium. It's an educational symposium. Mr. Dan Azzi is a former Harvard Advanced Leadership Fellow. He served as the chairman and CEO of Standard Chartered Bank. Mr. Azzi also held executive positions for Bear Stearns in Hong Kong, Deutsche Bank in New York, Merrill Lynch in London, and UBS in Auckland. He's also a regular writer for several media outlets and a philanthropist. Welcome, Mr. Azzi.
Thank you.
So this session will basically discuss the impact of COVID-19 outbreak on the regional and global economy, on the short term, medium term, and long term. So we will start with a general question on how do you see COVID-19 is affecting currently the global and regional economy on the shorter term before we mention the medium and long term.
So obviously, from what everyone is experiencing in pretty much all countries, the whole economies of the world have shut down in an unprecedented fashion. I don't think anyone remembers in our lifetime a case since maybe World War II where aviation, travel, everything has totally shut down. People are in their houses, etc. So from that perspective, what's happening today is unprecedented. And economic activity is built along either consumption or manufacturing, and both of those have either ground to a halt or been significantly reduced. So from that perspective, we are experiencing something that we haven't seen since World War II.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you think that at some point there are specific economic models or specific countries that will be affected at this point more than others? Would we see some specific economies that will not be able to come up easily from this crisis? And do you think what are the features of these models that might not allow them to recover easily?
You've got to first look at try to project to the future. So there's really three scenarios for COVID-19. Scenario one is that within the optimistic scenario, within 6 months the lockdown starts being lifted. They found some type of a solution, and then the economy start going back to normal within a very short period of time. Then there's the medium projection, sort of the most likely. They find the vaccine in, say, 12 months to 18 months, and then we go back to normal. And then there's the worst case scenario, which is that they don't find any solution to the problem, and we have to learn to adapt. We have to learn to live with it. Sort of like HIV/AIDS in the 80s and the 90s. This was like the big thing. Everybody was talking about it. It was a whole big catastrophe. They still haven't found a cure for it today, but it's hardly mentioned anymore. People have learned to sort of coexist with it. So these are the three scenarios, and it kind of depends on which one. I'm not a medical expert to be able to tell you which scenario will happen, but what we can do is we can project, okay, so what does it mean in the worst case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? So let's say that there is no cure, and let's say that everybody catches it. So you got to look at the death rates. You got to look at who does it affect, the medical system, etc. Is this the end of humanity as we know it? The answer is, even in the worst case scenario, it's not. There will be a sort of some type of herd mentality develop, even without any reaction, let alone with a reaction. So the bottom line is that if the worst case scenario is manageable, I mean, we've been through something like this in 1918 when the Spanish flu happened. The bad news is that we haven't really advanced all that much. The type of stuff we're doing, other than fancy graphs on computers, we really are kind of doing the same thing: social distancing and masks, and don't touch each other and stay away. We haven't really. In some ways, it's a nice thing because it's a wake-up call for us that we haven't become gods yet. We're not Homo Deus as that book says we are, or
yeah.
So from my perspective, I think that the Federal Reserve in the United States has injected an enormous amount of capital to try to counter this thing. Initially, I was thinking, how can that solve the problem? After all, you're solving a problem, different type of problem. You need to throw money into R&D, maybe into the medical field. How does throwing money in the way they did it help things. Well, apparently it did, judging by the stock market behavior. The stock market has hit its lows, and now it's almost in a bull market. So from that perspective, it reminds me of the old adage when I worked on Wall Street: "Don't fight the Fed." So
yeah. So, and do you think that the form or the shape of the global economy will change? Would it change its shape in a way or another as we currently know it after the COVID-19 outbreak? What do you think about that?
I think people exaggerate. There's no question that what we're seeing is unprecedented. People compare it to 1929, to 2008. I think the best comparison is really 1918, personally, because 2008 was a financial crisis which has a financial solution. 1929 there was a lot of leverage in the stock market, so different aspects of it. 1918 probably the biggest similarity. Will things change radically? I don't see this as the beginning of this new era like some people do. I do think we're going to adapt. People will start working remotely more. We'll start using venues like what you and I are using now, the Zoom. People realize that it's actually quite effective for 80 or 90% of the stuff we do. There will be more money allocated by advanced economies like the United States and Europe towards R&D and epidemics and stuff like that, because you got to experience the crisis before you believe it's there. Even though many people like President Obama warned about it, President Bush before that, and so on, Bill Gates. So that's from that perspective, there'll be different allocations. There'll be some companies that become more valuable as a result. But is this a total life changer? Like I said, they'll invent new stuff in metro stations. They might have like different ways for you to to be able to cleanse it, or to wash your hands, or to sanitize yourself, things like that. So it is an opportunity for a lot of industries, economies. I think that developed economies will be affected more in that the shutdown, economically speaking, and that the shutdown really shuts down manufacturing and salesmanship. A country, for example, like Lebanon, which is consumption based, shutting us down is in some ways easier because the economy already was tangled up. Middle East in between. It kind of depends. The more advanced you are, the more it hits you economically, which is why the Americans and Europeans are already looking at what next from now on.
Okay. So do you think there are some phases of comparison between this and the recession in 2008? And mainly, this is the only thing that we can compare with currently. Would this be somehow affecting on a longer term the economy so that it would take it some time to recover, especially the stock markets and so on?
Again, I don't think it's the same as 2008, because 2008 was a financial crisis, a credit crisis. So when the Federal Reserve and the other central banks injected liquidity into the market, it pretty much put it to a stop. Losses had to be taken. So this was let's call the 2008 crisis was a virtual crisis, meaning that it's a man-made constructs like the stock market, credit, all that stuff is not real, right? On the other hand, you catching corona and going to bed and then going to the hospital and dying, that's real stuff. That has nothing to do with the artificial constructs. So it's radically different from that. So that's where the differences are. And in fact, like I told you before, if in the Federal Reserve injecting cash, when they first did it, I thought it was a ridiculous idea, but it worked. The stock market already has recovered. It's up. I mean, the small cap is up, I don't know, 30% maybe. Wilshire 5,000, S&P 500 are up. So it reminded me the cliche on Wall Street when I worked there, 20 years ago. Don't fight the Fed. When these guys throw money at the problem, you don't want to be on the short end of that, again, I'm still surprised because I was deploying, when it was dropping, I was deploying funds into the stock market, but I didn't catch. I mean, I made some money. The good news. The bad news is that I didn't deploy enough because the market recovered too quickly. So if this thing carries on for a much longer time, I see the market reverse again. But in the grand scheme of things, this is not the end of humanity. We at worst, we're going to learn to adapt. We'll be sitting, we won't shake hands anymore. We'll do like the Asians do. We'll bow maybe. We'll do, like some of us do like this, even in the Middle East. So what? It's not a big deal. I never saw the value of always kissing each other every time I saw you yesterday and I am one. It's like, it seemed like sometimes it's good to change some habits anyhow.
Definitely. So the last question, Do you think that there are specific sectors in the economy that will actually disappear and other sectors that will totally flourish, especially that are related to technology? We might know that some related to technology would be actually flourishing and making good business, but on the level of other businesses that might disappear, do you have, or maybe get weakened a lot? Do you have a specific idea about that?
I think it's more going to be evolutionary, I mean, certain things, the value of certain things, like, a business like Amazon, this was actually growing. They were trying to hire other people. Of course, on the other hand, they have to invest in certain things to protect the employees, right? Automation, robotics might be more in demand because, if you look at replication, pharmaceutical research might see a boost in allocation of funds. So it kind of depends. Even the way restaurants are done, it kind of depends. It showed our weaknesses in the medical field or in the biological, parasitical, bacterial infection type of stuff. But at the same, again, it depends on how big this thing is, how long it lasts. Is it going to disappear like SARS just out of the blue, or are we going to have to adapt to it? If this thing lasts for another year or two, or even worse, it becomes like HIV, where we have to actually learn to coexist with it, then it would change our lifestyles. The restaurants have to become different. It's a bit like the guys in the airplanes that we just took back from overseas. You couldn't see three people next to each other. It might change the way airlines are constructed, airplanes and airlines are constructed. Seating arrangements might make it more expensive. You might have to, so there will be an evolution, but disappearance of certain businesses totally, and I don't see anything major like that happening necessarily. Just evolution.
So generally, we can tell that you might have some like positive outlook to the future of economy as a final note to this segment of the session, right?
Yes, I think so. I mean, the fatality ratios are relatively low. It's not like I just walk by you from 100 meters away and then I drop dead. It's not like that. So there's it's not the, I mean, if you have it, it's bad. If you're one of the guys that are more affected by it, it's bad. But it's really not the end of humanity as we see it. You know what I mean? It's just at this point in time, what's unprecedented about it isn't necessarily the dangers of it. It's more the effect on daily life, the fact that you can't go to a restaurant, or you can't take a train, or you can't take an airplane. That is a once in a lifetime type of hit. From that perspective, it's unique. But in terms of the threat, the death threat, there's many other things that have a higher death threat at this point.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Azzi. That was great. I'm really grateful for your time, and I'm sure that the students and faculty and the public will benefit from this information. And thanks a lot again.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day.
Thank you.